Have you ever walked into a room and felt completely invisible? Not disliked, not rejected, just unseen. Most people think this happens because they are boring, or unattractive, or not interesting enough. That is not the reason. The real reason is far more disturbing. Because being ignored is not random. It is not bad luck. It is a response, a calculated, unconscious response that other people's minds make about you in less than 3 seconds. And once you understand what triggers that response, you will never look at your own behavior the same way again. Most people spend years trying to solve this the wrong way. They change their clothes. They change their opinions to match whoever they are speaking to. They rehearse jokes in the mirror the night before a gathering, hoping the right line will finally make them memorable. None of it works, because the problem was never on the surface. The problem was happening underneath language, underneath appearance, in a layer of the brain that makes its decision before your first sentence even finishes forming. Understand this: human beings do not decide who to pay attention to. Their nervous system decides for them, long before conscious thought arrives. And that nervous system is running one single question on a loop every time it meets another person. Does this person matter to my survival or my status? If the answer comes back no, you disappear. Not because anyone chose to erase you, because their brain quietly filed you under irrelevant and moved on to something that felt more important. This is the first truth you must understand. Attention is not a gift people give you because they are kind. Attention is a resource people protect because it is expensive. Every human brain is constantly rationing focus, deciding in real time who deserves it and who does not. And when you are ignored, it is not an insult, it is a verdict. A verdict about the signals you were sending without realizing it. Ask yourself something uncomfortable right now. When was the last time a room went quiet the moment you spoke? If you cannot remember, that tells you something. Not something flattering, something true. Here is the first psychological law behind why people ignore you. People give attention to certainty and withdraw it from hesitation. The moment your voice rises at the end of a sentence like a question, the moment your body apologizes for taking up space, the moment you ask for permission with your posture before you have even spoken a word, something ancient in the observer's brain registers you as low value. Not because they judged you consciously, because thousands of years of survival wiring taught the human mind to conserve attention for those who project stability and withdraw it from those who project doubt. This is not fair, but it is real. Most people spend their whole lives trying to fix being ignored by becoming louder. They talk more. They over-explain. They perform enthusiasm they do not feel, hoping volume will substitute for presence. It never works. Because loudness without certainty reads as noise, and the brain filters noise instantly. Here is the second truth, and this one is harder to accept. People do not ignore you because you gave too little. They ignore you because you gave too much, too soon, with nothing held back. Think about the last time you met someone who told you everything within the first 10 minutes. Their whole life story, their opinions on everything. their emotional state, laid bare, unprompted. What did you feel? Not curiosity, something closer to exhaustion. The human mind is drawn toward what it has to work for. This is not vanity. It is evolutionary economy. If something is fully visible immediately, the brain assumes there is nothing left to discover, and it moves on to the next stimulus that still holds mystery. You were not ignored because you lacked depth. You were ignored because you displayed all of it at once and left nothing for the other person's mind to chase. Sit with that for a moment, because the implication is unsettling. It means restraint is not coldness. Restraint is what keeps you interesting long enough for someone to stay in the room. Now here is where things become darker. There is a third mechanism at play, one that most people will never consciously notice in themselves, and it is called social gravity. People are pulled toward whoever appears to need them least. This sounds cruel. It is cruel. But it is also consistent, tested, and repeated across every culture, every era, every social hierarchy in recorded history. The person who needs the room's approval leaks that need through 100 tiny signals. Constant checking for reactions. Constant softening of opinions to avoid disagreement. Constant filling of silence because silence feels unbearable and the room feels that need, even if it cannot name it. And the room retreats from it. Meanwhile, the person who appears unaffected by whether the room likes them or not becomes the center of gravity without trying. Not because they are better, because their nervous system is not broadcasting hunger. People do not gather around warmth alone. People gather around whoever seems least desperate for them to stay. Understand this. Desperation has a scent, and other minds detect it faster than logic can explain. Now pause. Because what I am about to tell you will feel personal, and it should. Every time you have replayed a conversation in your head, wondering what you should have said differently, wondering if you talked too much, wondering if you were too eager, too available, too quick to agree. That feeling was not paranoia. That was your own mind, quietly recognizing the leak in real time and being unable to stop it. Here is the fourth truth, and it is the one that most people will never say out loud. Being ignored is often the price of being predictable. If people already know exactly what you will say before you say it, exactly how you will react before you react, exactly how far they can push you before you push back, their mind stops allocating resources to observe you. Why would it? There is nothing left to calculate. You have already been solved. The brain devotes attention to unresolved variables, not to solved equations. And a person who reacts the same way every time, agrees the same way every time, shows up needing the same validation every time, has become a solved equation. You were not ignored because you were uninteresting as a person. You were ignored because your patterns became so consistent that there was nothing left to predict. And prediction is what curiosity feeds on. This is where most self-improvement advice fails you completely. It tells you to be more likable, to smile more, to ask more questions, to perform interest in others so they will return the favor. But likability was never the missing ingredient. Unpredictability held together by calm control was always the missing ingredient. Let that settle before you keep going. Now there is a principle buried inside all of this. One that has been whispered through courts and boardrooms for centuries, though rarely spoken plainly. The one who explains the least is trusted the most, because silence leaves room for others to imagine a depth that words would only diminish. That is not comfort. That is a weapon, and most people never learn to hold it. Here is the fifth truth, and this is where the psychology turns from painful to useful. Attention follows unresolved tension, not resolved comfort. Every story that has ever captured a human mind for more than 30 seconds follows this exact rule. A question opens. It does not close immediately. The mind leans forward, uncomfortable, wanting resolution, refusing to look away until it gets one. Human relationships work by the same mechanical rule, whether anyone admits it or not. If you resolve every tension instantly, if you answer every text the second it arrives, if you agree instantly to avoid conflict, if you explain yourself the moment someone questions you, you are closing the loop before the other person's mind ever had a chance to lean in. There is no gap left for them to fill with curiosity. There is nothing left to wonder about. And a mind with nothing left to wonder about will always drift toward whoever still holds a question mark. Now ask yourself something even more uncomfortable. How many of your relationships have you accidentally flattened by resolving every tension the moment it appeared? How many rooms have you left with nothing unsaid, nothing held back, nothing for anyone to think about once you walked out? Silence is not empty. Silence is the space where someone else's imagination does the work you were about to do with words. And once you let their imagination do that work, they begin to feel invested in you in a way that explanation could never produce. Here is a strategic truth, cold enough that most people flinch from it the first time they hear it spoken plainly. The one who is fully understood has already lost their power over the room, because there is nothing left of them to pursue. Sit with that, because if it is true, it changes everything about how you have been trying to be seen. Let me show you what this looks like when it plays out in real life, not as theory, but as a scene. There was once an advisor to a powerful court who never raised his voice and never lowered it either. He simply spoke once, said exactly what needed to be said, and stopped. Other advisors filled silence with commentary, with reassurance, with constant updates on their loyalty and their effort. This one man said nothing unless it mattered, and when he did speak, the entire room stopped to listen, because everyone had learned that his words were rare, and rare things get examined closely. Historians later wrote that rulers trusted him more than men who spoke 10 times as often, not because he was wiser, but because he never spent his value carelessly. He rationed his presence the way a wealthy man rations his fortune, never flaunting it, never explaining it, simply allowing its scarcity to do the convincing. That is the picture you should hold in your mind. Not a man performing confidence. A man who had simply stopped negotiating for approval one silence at a time, until silence itself became his signature. Now here is a seventh truth, quieter than the rest, but just as important. People do not ignore the person who disagrees with them. They ignore the person who agrees with everyone. Think about why. Agreement with everyone provides no information. It tells the room nothing about who you actually are, what you actually value, or where you would stand if the room turned against you. A person who bends toward every opinion in the room becomes indistinguishable from the room itself. And you cannot pay attention to something that has no edges, because there is nothing to locate. Disagreement, offered calmly and without apology, does something agreement never can. It gives you a shape. It tells the nervous system of everyone watching that you exist as a separate entity with your own center of gravity, rather than as a reflection of whatever mood is currently in the room. Most people are terrified of this because they confuse disagreement with conflict. It is not the same thing. Conflict is loud, defensive, and emotional. Calm disagreement is quiet, brief, and undefended. It does not ask for a fight. It simply exists, the way a locked door exists, without needing to explain itself to anyone who tries the handle. Remember this. A room can forget 100 things you agreed with by the end of the week. A room rarely forgets the one moment you did not. Now let us bring this together into the sixth and final law, the one that governs every mechanism we have already uncovered. You are not ignored because of what you lack. You are ignored because of what you reveal, when you reveal it, and how much control you surrender in the process. But before we close this loop completely, there is one more layer worth naming, because it explains why some people read every law you just learned, nod along, and still walk back into the same room tomorrow and get ignored again. Knowledge without a change in nervous system state is just decoration. You can memorize every principle in this video and still leak the same signals tomorrow morning, because the leak was never coming from your intellect. It was coming from an old, automatic pattern your body runs whenever it senses the possibility of rejection. Understanding the mechanism intellectually does not disable the mechanism automatically. Your nervous system does not care what you know. It cares what it has practiced. This is why some people study psychology for years and remain just as invisible as before. They collected information. They never rebuilt the pattern underneath it. So here is the actual practice, stripped of any comfort. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself when no one demanded an explanation, notice it and say nothing instead. The next time you feel the pull to fill silence because it feels unbearable, let 5 extra seconds pass before you speak, and watch what happens to the room. The next time someone disagrees with you, and your instinct is to soften your position immediately to keep the peace, hold it for one more sentence before you decide whether to yield. These moments feel small. They are not small. They are the exact micro decisions where your old pattern either wins again or starts to lose its grip. Power is never rebuilt in the big dramatic moment everyone imagines. It is rebuilt in these unglamorous, private, 3-second windows that no one else ever sees. Certainty over hesitation. Restraint over exposure. composure over need, unpredictability over pattern, tension over resolution. Each of these is not a personality trait you either have or do not have. Each of these is a behavior, and behavior can be rebuilt, one decision at a time, starting today, without announcing to a single person that you are doing it. Do not tell anyone you are changing. The moment you announce a transformation, you invite people to test it, challenge it, and pull you back into the old pattern they were comfortable watching. Change in silence. Answer one question slower than you normally would. Reveal one thing less than you normally would. Leave one sentence unfinished, on purpose, and let someone else's mind finish it for you. Small adjustments. Repeated daily. Invisible to everyone except the results they produce. Because here is the final uncomfortable truth, hiding underneath everything you just learned. The people who ignore you were never punishing you. They were simply following signals you were sending without knowing it. Signals that told their nervous system there was nothing left to discover, nothing worth protecting attention for, nothing uncertain enough to hold on to. Change the signal, and you change everything that follows it, without ever needing to explain why. You will not need to convince anyone that you are different. You will not need to post about the change, or narrate the transformation, or ask anyone to notice. If you do this correctly, they will notice on their own, and they will not be able to explain why. They will simply feel for the first time that you are harder to read, harder to predict, and somehow harder to look away from. That feeling is not affection. It is attention rebuilding itself around a person who finally stopped giving it away for free. But there is one more layer to this. One darker current running underneath everything we have covered, and it explains why some people who master all 5 of these laws still end up isolated, still end up misunderstood, still end up mistaking control for connection until it costs them something they cannot get back. That is not a story for this video. That is where we go next.